Hello, welcome to the Big Strategy Podcast. I'm your host and fellow strategist, Jeff Eyet. This is your go-to spot for real talk with the masterminds of business strategy. It's about sharing stories, insights, and those little nuggets of wisdom to help you unlock big growth. Let's turn the key and spring into action.
So Jenny, we've worked together. Well, first we were colleagues, classmates at Haas, and now we teach together at Haas at work. And you were generous enough to guide me over to the Fung Institute. So we've trod parallel paths, and it was only time that you joined us and shared some of what you know with the rest of our audience. So thank you, Jenny Caleshu, for joining us.
So happy to be here. Nice to see you, Jeff.
Absolutely. Well, it always starts with why. And so start us out. Why, Jenny? Why?
Why, Jenny? Well, let's go back 4 or 5 billion years ago. Now, we'll talk about storytelling today. Why should we care about stories? And actually, we could go back kind of in evolutionary history because stories are so often the way that information has been passed down. If you think about it, before the invention of writing, how did knowledge get disseminated? Where could you find the good berries or watch out for the saber-toothed tiger, whatever that is, right? It's going to be stories because stories are what makes things memorable. They engage us. And actually, our brains are just really hardwired to really enjoy stories that have lots of not just the facts and the figures, but the emotions and the feelings too.
So that you said a key point is you famously say, stories are data with soul, and the data is good berry, bad berry, but there's a soul. There's so many throughout history, right? So many societies have crafted stories, narratives around that data that, as you said, it becomes hardwired in us. Why do stories hardwire things for us?
Yeah, they're really memorable. And actually, there's some really interesting neuroscience behind this, which I love. Paul Zak, who is a scientist, and I believe he's down at Claremont School, and he has done some research on non-invasively, thankfully, tracking the amount of oxytocin in your bloodstream. And so if you remember what oxytocin is from your biology class, it's not OxyContin.
No, different oxy.
Nope, not different kind. It's the hormone that is released in your bloodstream when you have a really good interpersonal feeling with somebody. So when you are in love, in childbirth, like a bonding hormone, basically, it's in all of us. It's not a gendered hormone. And he has been able to measure literally that the oxytocin increases in your bloodstream when you hear a story that has emotions in it compared to a story that doesn't have emotions in it. So literally you feel better with a good story. And so those are the stories that we want to craft as leaders, as innovators. We want to capture our audience's attention. We do not want to bore them. We want them to really pay attention to us, and we want to have them move to something, right? Move to action, move to a new level of awareness, a new level of care about whatever we care about. So stories, I think, are just critical, really, for all of us.
Absolutely. And I always remember, I actually remember fewer people that teach me facts than people I remember who have emotionally inspired me, even if I don't remember their story. And I think that's probably that hormonal kick that you talked about. But when we talk about, as David Reamer, our colleague at Berkeley, says, in order to tell a good story, you must have a good story. And so, with that, how do we go about finding good stories? Does it just mean like I've got to, go do crazy things to get all these stories? Or can we craft narratives out of, the mundane?
Absolutely. It's interesting. I hear a lot of stories. I teach storytelling across a lot of different domains. And a lot of the time it's the leadership story is actually just a regular moment in your life. And what I find makes the really great stories are the stories where there have to have something that's happened, actually, right? You can't have, we're not going to remember Little Red Riding Hood if she doesn't meet the wolf. She just carries her, basket of cookies to grandmother's house and she's fine. There's no story there. So there has to be some moment of change or challenge. Something is transformed. And then it's those details that bring it to life. The Little Red Riding Hood. When we have the specific, going back to the berries, right, in the bush, we're going to remember if somebody tells us about the most juicy red blackberries that were just like, you could just feel it in your mouth when you ate them and they were so delicious, right? Like those sensory details are going to be a lot more memorable than just red berries good, blueberries bad,
Right.
or actually probably vice versa. Don't eat the red berries, eat the blueberries. But yeah.
And that's what I always look for in a good story is, when is the earthquake? When is that seismic shift that you can't go back on? So, right, when Snow White bites the apple, that's an irreversible shift. And you know that whatever I had up until that point is now going to be flipped. But your audience wants that, right? I mean, they listen to you as a storyteller because they want that emotional journey. Is that right?
Exactly. And this is, again, true if you are a leader, right? Like a leader can talk about, come on team, we can do this. We've been through hard times before. We're going to do it again this time. Like, that's fine. But I would much rather hear about a time when that particular leader actually specifically faced a challenge and overcame it. And what did they actually do? And sometimes it's actually even more powerful when it's the story from their personal life. So not their private life. So, we're not asking you to air your dirty laundry here.
Yeah.
But to share something that has come from more than just, the story, frankly, that a lot of people post on LinkedIn that says the team had to come together under a tight deadline and, whatever, blah,
Right.
blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Don't, I want to hear about, a story that I've told a lot is, it was a beautiful full moonlit night and I'm out running. And I feel like I'm flying until I'm actually flying. And I fall and I land on my face. You may remember this because this was, I think we knew each other back then.
Yeah.
This is about 10 years ago. And I, totally injure myself. And I have to decide, am I going to keep training to run this half marathon that is the reason I'm out running at night in the first place? Or do I just give up? Because I was honestly one of those kids that was last picked for every sporting event ever. And so, this is probably a sign, just enough, Jenny. You're not a runner. Why are you even bothering? Or I could decide that I'm not going to give up and I'm going to actually keep training once I'm healed. And then, believe it or not, I finished that finish line of the 13, mile half marathon on Ocean Beach with a best time ever.
Congratulations.
Right? So now you have a sense of what kind of leader I might be because you know a little bit about where I came from, you know what challenge I've overcome. And you've seen that, like, even when things are hard, I don't give up. Hopefully that would make you want to kind of work with somebody like me, and maybe you even have a similar story that now relates to you. So those kinds of stories and details help bring it to life. So when you're maybe pitching your new product or a startup, you have an idea like that you want to get people, to invest, to come along with you, to join your team, whatever that is, bringing in the moment, the detail, that challenge moment, right? The falling on your face, literally of the night. Bring that into the room. So maybe it could be you've done an interview with a potential customer and you hear about their pain point and you're able to describe that in real life, like I was there detail, right? That's where, as interviewers, we capture those verbatim quotes, right? We want to really bring in the voice of the customer. Literally, what did they say to you? How did they feel? Where were they when that happened? Those are the moments that are going to come to life and they'll be memorable for your audience.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I totally agree. A great story always sparks a yes and. And that yes and is a story of probably similar emotional depth. I'm not going to respond, yeah, I fell once too. Like, no, I'm going to, I tried that half marathon and I didn't make it, or I made it too. And you build that camaraderie and that closeness through this vulnerability. And that's really what storytelling does, is storytelling peels back, in my opinion, that layer of the onion and allows you to be a little more vulnerable to others. But that's how we build connections.
Exactly. And you want to connect with your audience, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down about, is that, I have to think about, what is my audience going to care about? What do they know? What might they not know? What are they going to be interested in? How familiar are they with what I'm going to bring them? And I'm going to have to tune that message that I have about whether it's myself as a leader, the product, again, the startup, whatever that is, I'm going to have to tune that to them. But that means I'm going to have to do some research, not only on myself and what is my story, but how is this story going to be relevant to the people that I'm talking to? Because there certainly are times when we talk to people where they have to be there, like it's a compliance training. They're going to have to sit through it regardless of whether you're any interesting or not. But, if you are trying to pitch a new idea, they could get up and walk away if you're not very interesting. So you better find a way to make that story something that they don't want to stop listening to.
Right.
So you're going to have to know your audience.
At the Berkeley Innovation Group, we are a strategy consultancy and AI advisory firm focused on mid-market companies looking to unlock big growth. In contrast to management consultants' typical top-down, hypothesis-driven approach, Big uses a curiosity-inspired, bottom-up approach, leveraging customer insights to drive strategy co-creation. Learn more about our approach by downloading our ebook at biginnovates.com/ebook. Now, back to the show.
What brings me to a challenge that I always get is people who think they need to change their story because it's a professional setting. I can't be vulnerable there. I'm presenting the quarterly financials, or this is a business pitch, and they're going to buy because we're saving them money, or something like that. So how do you, and for the audience benefit, Jenny and I go way back, and one of the classes she teaches at Haas is leadership communications, and many offshoots of that, and also has a professional practice in that, which she'll share. But the point being is this: you live and breathe this, and you've taught, I won't say how many years of MBA, these skills. So give us what's the hack? What's the playbook? How do we balance getting the message across, but making it memorable with personal details, but still remain, authentic, professional?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's, this is really about knowing your audience, right? What is going to be relatable to them? What is going to inspire them and motivate them? And yeah, there's probably a place to be vulnerable. And there's probably some places where, honestly, you're probably hopefully not going to break down in tears on the quarterly earnings call with your investors. That might not be the place to have that level of emotion. But there are definitely ways to appeal to both the heart and the mind, we would say. So you want to find ways to bring in not just the data, but what should your audience feel about the data? So if you are, for example, presenting quarterly financials, should we be excited? Should we be concerned? Should we invest more? Should we retrench? What's at stake here? And if it's just, here's the data and I'll let you decide for yourself, you're probably not doing a very good job.
No.
Because as a speaker, you need to have a perspective. Otherwise, why should I listen to you? If it could be given by anybody, honestly, then just make it an email and save my time.
Thank you. Those are the next words out of my mouth.
Yeah. I want the story. I want the presentation to be so uniquely crafted that it only can be delivered by you yourself. So if that means bringing in something that really matters to you, if it is a personal story, if it is, some of your genuine feelings about whatever this is, you're going to need to do that in a way that does feel true to yourself and that is resonant with what your audience is expecting, and frankly is delivered in such a way that your audience is going to believe you.
Yeah.
So when I think about how do we build trust, which is another topic I'm super passionate about, I think about it not just being my credibility. Do I have the experience and the expertise? Do I know my stuff? And am I delivering it in a reliable way such that I'm credible in how I deliver it? I mean, I use this honestly as kind of a throwaway example, but I actually saw it earlier this year. I was in a boardroom with a senior leadership team, and the new CEO gets up to welcome the senior leadership team.
Right.
And he literally says, no joke, "Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be here as your new CEO. I understand that the numbers this quarter have been the best sales ever. It makes me really happy and proud to have joined this amazing company." And I was like, it's not my job to give feedback to the new CEO in this moment, but I'm like, wake up, my friend. Do you really care about this job? Do you care about this company? Do you care about the sales? I mean, it sounds like they've worked really hard and you're going to reap the benefits of it because you're the new CEO with them doing this great job right now. And I'm not feeling it. So this is not a credible message in the way you're delivering it. So I'm sure your script is great. Whatever this is that you've got written up that you're sharing with the team, amazing, right words, but not meaningful delivery because there's no heart in it. There's no feeling in it.
Yeah.
That's not a trustworthy message to me.
So it's interesting. I'm recapping what we've said. I mean, you have to have a story to tell a story. It's okay to peel back that external layer and knowing your audience, but overlay a personal connection that's not only you putting yourself into the story, but gives your audience a way to also connect with that story. And now the third layer you've laid out is this idea of trust beyond credibility. And yes, you can totally bomb on the vocal presentation of your story as you shared, but you can also lose trust through your presence and you can gain trust through your presence and so forth. So what advice do you give around the nonverbal presence in this context of building trust and helping people connect with the message?
Yeah, there's some really good research out here as well. Moravian really founded this a couple of decades ago, I think, or maybe even longer than that, that the impact of your message, really only a very small percentage of that comes from the word choice, something like 8 or 10%. And the next chunk of that is how you use your voice, your tone, your pace, if you're monotone, right? Very boring. But the significant majority, like 60+% of your impact comes from nonverbals. And so that's why it can be really challenging if you are in an online environment a lot of the time and maybe people's cameras aren't on or there's a glitch or, you're slacking with your boss or whatever it is. And we're missing so much information. And that really is your presence. And so it's not just like the nonverbal, how I choose to communicate with my gestures, my facial expression. It's also my energy, honestly.
Yeah.
And maybe that sounds a little woo for California here, but it is like everybody's got their own unique style. So we're definitely not saying you need to like put on a show, whatever. I am somebody who gestures quite a bit. I have a lot of nonverbal expression going on. You don't have to do that if that doesn't feel natural to you, but you should think about what are the ways that I can amplify the impact. And that is going to come through nonverbal expression. So it does also mean that sort of like internal being present as well. So before I joined this call with you, Jeff, I made sure to hit do not disturb on my computer because I do not want to be distracted by a Slack notification coming in. This is something that's important. If I'm going to be in an important high stakes meeting, I'm going to be camera on. I'm going to be looking literally at my camera, because that's what appears to be eye contact with your audience. I know it's challenging. I believe you can do it. I'm also going to be thinking about how do I set up my background and the amount of space that I take up in the literal frames. I mean, these are like simple hacks I know that I feel like maybe we should have all learned back in 2020, 2021. But join calls where you can't see the person because there's no light on their face.
Right.
Or we're so far away from the camera because they're just in the back of a big conference room. And it's like, can you hear me? I feel like I have to yell at you.
Hello.
Yeah, exactly. So these are all factors that actually really do make a difference because what you really want to do at the end of the day, you want to align the intentions that I have with the impact that I'm having. So you need to make sure that, how do I want my audience to feel? What do I want them to think? What do I want them to do with my message? And then what is the best way for me to communicate that and make sure that that actually lines up? So it could also be what sort of, visual aids do I need in this presentation? Do I need slides? If I'm using slides, are they amplifying my message or distracting from my message? People who put, when they say death by PowerPoint, we know what that looks like.
Yeah.
That's too many words on a screen. That is bad graphics, distracting stock imagery, bullets all over the place, charts that don't make sense. We know about that. But we still see it, which is the bummer. And when we're in a room together, for like I'm actually presenting real life in a space with you, sometimes people are like talking to the screen.
Yeah.
They're talking to the slides. They're not talking to their audience. Your audience is the most important thing in the room. Your slides are like your wingman. They should be backing you up. They should not be taking over for you.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And PowerPoint is its own language. And I think we need to treat it as such. And as you said, it's there to support us, not distract us, which is often the case, unfortunately.
Truly. And I see a lot of people pitching, right? Because this is what, a lot of people bring slides to show
we get this all the time in class.
Right? Their product. Here's here's my great idea. I really want to, develop this further. And then they, basically write out what they're going to say on the slide. And when you write it out, we read faster than we can listen to you speak. And so your audience just starts reading that, and then they're just totally tuning you out. And they've done reading it before you've even finished. And so they're like, why am I paying attention to you? So that's no fun. What my suggestion is like a great image. If you can, bring it to life in some visual way. Literally, an image speaks 1,000 words, right? But also, maybe that's the moment to actually hit that B button, the blackout button on your keyboard or on your clicker, because that'll turn off the camera there for a minute, the presenter for a minute. And so now we're just watching you. You're no longer taking slides. You're now the main focus. It's as though a spotlight has come on you. So that's a great way to use that moment to tell a story, to really bring in some feelings. And then you can go back to some of the data about, your amazing profitability charts that you've drawn up and how much investors are going to make from your product or whatever it is, right? But really think of them as your backup and you as the main star.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought of it in such clear terms. And the B button is an awesome hack in terms of how to get ourselves some space to share that message.
And it also helps you slow down, because that's the other thing, right? Like, I know that when I get excited, I talk very fast. And so I know that if I need to really connect with my audience and I want them to really hear this moment in my story, in my presentation, I might actually bring in some more pausing, some more breath. Or maybe even if I'm not sure what's going to happen next, I just take a breath. It'll come to me. My audience doesn't even know. The audience is just like, wow, there's so much gravitas in this moment. I'm really listening. Now what's going to come next? Those are the power of the pause.
It might have been Sherlock Holmes, but it was something the average person uses a pipe to smoke, but the wise person uses the pipe or time to think.
Oh my God, I love it.
And that's whether it's true or not, it's just a perfect visual. And I always remember it. And in that breath I just took, didn't you just reinforce in your own mind how smart your question was?
Exactly.
So one thing to zoom in on, because we hear a lot of pitches in class, but also pitches in business, and whether we're coaching someone or giving them ourselves. And one thing that people always forget, and I know you and I both coach this, is that understand that at that moment, you are the expert in what you're presenting. You are the expert. You've spent more time on this. You know more about this. You're smarter than the people in the room on this subject. And I think we repeat that to give them confidence that they belong and to own that presence. But on the other hand, it's also a risk, because you can go talk too fast, talk too deep, bring too much of your heart on your sleeve to the conversation. So how do you balance that, knowing that I'm the expert, but still bringing the others along for the ride?
So great. You have the right to be here.
Yeah.
Right. You've been asked to share this for some reason, and trusting that, like, yes, you have the right to share whatever this message is that you have crafted and created here. And again, coming back to some degree to knowing your audience, right?
Yeah.
Like, is this an audience that is going to want to really get into the technical weeds with you? Cool. Is this an audience of executives who are not engineers, and you are an engineer and you're trying to explain your solution? They're probably not going to want to get into the details there on that. They're going to want to know, what decision do we need to make right now? What is the potential impact of this? What's the risk? What's the upside? Stick with that. I sometimes think about, the What is this a 30,000 foot message, a 10,000 foot message, or are we really literally down on the ground? And often you need less than you think. So we talk about being deep and brief. If you are deep and brief, then you are getting to the heart of what matters here, matters to your audience, matters to you, that you believe in, you have a lot of conviction about. And brief, because if your audience has questions, they will ask. And much better to give them some space to talk about what is important to them than to overwhelm them with, this flood of detail that they did not ask for, they do not want, and they do not understand. Because you want your audience to know that you actually trust them and think that they are smart, intelligent people as well. This is when to bring it back to storytelling here for a moment.
Please.
When we're talking about stories and stories that have a good, clear beginning, middle, and end, I know that sounds like rocket science. It's very hard to do well, though, right? We start with something to capture their attention. There's a challenge, a dragon we fight in the middle, and then a message that we want to land at the end. And what I like to do is when I'm thinking about landing this message, I do want to be clear about what the takeaway is for my audience, but I don't want to beat them over the head with it too much. I don't want it to be too on the nose. That's why we laugh at, soap operas, because they tell us what we're supposed to feel, right? They make you, and that's where, they go too much into that. But if I am really helping my audience, like trusting my audience and respecting them, I might end a story with a bit of a question, something provocative, something that makes them feel like, ooh, I kind of have an interesting thought about that maybe I want to share now back with the presenter. That's going to make that more of a dialogue and a conversation, and also help you really reinforce and clarify. If they ask a question, you can get into what you think the takeaway is, but you might also really learn something from your audience, which is going to make, again, whatever reason you're giving this story or giving this presentation that much more impactful, because now you're in it together.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I didn't learn that till I was teaching, was that the goal is not for me to be right. The goal is for the audience to come on the same journey, to follow the path that you've, not perfectly, but you've at least created some path through the bush, and they can follow you on that journey of their own. And, it's okay if it's not a clear path, because that's what builds that shared experience.
We're doing it together, right? Like almost everything is truly collaborative.
Storytelling is collaborative, isn't it?
Yeah. People really don't want to, I sometimes say, people don't want to work with a superhero or a robot. Superheroes have their power because of magic, which doesn't exist, right? So nobody is a superhero. Even the most accomplished person, has things that they've made mistakes on. They've done things wrong. Things have gone sideways, So to pretend that isn't true, that you haven't had things happen that have been mistakes, just isn't real. Again, it comes back to, I don't really trust that.
Yeah.
So you're not a superhero. Nobody is. You're also not a robot, right? Because again, nothing is just ones and zeros. There's always some flex in the system.
Correct.
And you're, again, a human being. So that's who people want to work with. That's who they want to follow. That's who they want to collaborate with.
Right.
We don't want people that have it perfect.
And I think that is the perfect note to wrap on. So Jenny, if there has been a conversation that's flown by, it's this. And I'm so grateful for you taking the time to share many years of wisdom and experience with the audience in terms of having a why about that story, showing that vulnerability, being competent in overlaying your own personal experience, and then using credibility to drive trust. And then these smaller things of what are the nonverbals? How are we aligning our actions with our intentions? And just the small things like talking to the audience and being empathic about bringing them along. All fascinating stuff. So thank you very much. And tell us just a little bit more about where folks can keep an eye on you, or the things that you do professionally, besides teaching, if what you've talked about resonates.
Yeah, thanks so much. The work I do, aside from being in the classroom with Jeff and the other fabulous folks at the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley, is I work for the Berkeley Executive Coaching Institute, where I'm the faculty director for our executive coaching certification and leadership intensive, among other projects. So if you are interested in finding out ways that you can really leverage your knowledge, your skills, your emotional intelligence to make change on your teams and in the world, come find me at berkeleyeci.com.
And I can't recommend it enough. I actually took one of the workshops after I graduated only because it's so important as a leader to have these skills that Jenny teaches in your toolbox. So, and if you're a prospective or you're a current student at Haas, be sure to go beyond leadership communications and into trust-based leadership and some of the other classes that Jenny teaches. Well, Jenny, I want to say thank you again very much for joining us.
I appreciate it. Have a great day.